You mean to have finished the film?
Well, and look at us, all these other people.
Well, you know, I already was very blown away by this. Now that they've seen the movie, I feel worse. Right? But yeah, it feels amazing. I'm happy you guys got to see it. I'll tell you guys a dirty secret. Wait a minute. No, wait. Maybe people are filming this. I can't say it. Never mind.
Have any actual official films in here?
Yeah. Well, the secret is that we're still working on this movie. Like I was speaking like, yeah, this is the movie that's going to be released will be quite different than this one. Because if you haven't noticed, if you've seen my work before, like I'm a lot like Mike in the movie. One of the reasons I wanted to make this film is because I saw so much of myself in these guys, and certainly that feeling of being like, oh, we could probably do this 1% better if we worked all the time doing it, is very much my philosophy. And so, yeah, just last night, my friends and I, they're in Toronto, were making tons of changes to this movie, which I'm happy to tell you about. Some good changes, you guys will be happy. A lot of the things where you were like, why? We took those out. And the things where you were like, I wonder what was really going on there. We've expanded them. So you'll be very happy when you see the final cut, which is coming out, I think in the UK in June, and in the US, North America, May 12th. Not like you guys already saw it. Why would you ever see it? And really, you're not missing much. There's no other jokes. I could tell when I got here, I was like, oh yeah, these are people who are going to think this was going to be hilarious. And I know the movie gets quite dark by the end, although I personally think that stuff in the second half of the movie is way funnier than the beginning. What does Mike say? It's a keyboard on a screen on a keyboard? Oh my God! We screened the film in Berlin, right? And the audience is quite serious. And we screened it in a competition, and what that means is it's like with the most pretentious movies you've ever seen in your life. Right? So if you've ever seen, they're so pretentious I couldn't even name a movie you would know that's screened in the Berlin competition. And then there's Us, right? Which is just basically schlock. It's like the most, what would you say? It's like you're hanging out with a bunch of young people telling jokes, and it has the artistic integrity of Land Party. And so we're screening there, and as soon as the film, basically as soon as the score of the movie starts to get a little bit serious, all the Germans stop laughing. Immediately. And I'm sitting there in the audience like, oh man, I guess these guys don't realize that this stuff is supposed to be kind of funny, and they didn't. But they liked it. But it's happy to screen. I'm happy to screen it for you guys. And this also is only the second Q&A I've been able to do for the film, because in Germany they don't let you do those. This is not a good advertisement for Germany. I'm realizing.
So the story of these sorts of emotions is the same. Like, I didn't know anything about it.
Most people don't. It's actually what attracted me to the film. Yeah. Because my friend and I, Matt Miller, were asked not to make this movie, but just to write it. And one of the reasons that we agreed was because, probably like many of you before you got here, we thought, oh, that seems so boring, right? Like, why would I ever go watch a movie about Blackberry or work on it? It just seems so stupid. It's a failed product. It was very unsexy. It is largely like a has-been. It seems so boring on its face. And we thought, oh, this is perfect for us to make a movie in our style, because it's going to fool so many general audiences into going to see it, and then they'll sit down and watch this and be like, what the fuck is this? It was a way that we could almost Trojan horse our filmmaking style and really that voice, whatever you want to call it, into something slightly more mainstream. And because it's Canadian, and because Canadians have such a stigma of being kind of very second place to America and having no great exports, no great products. It's not like my country has, other than hockey really, it's not like we're internationally known for anything. And so I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity for us to hide inside of a very boring concept and make, I guess, what would you say, formally challenging filmmaking inside something that that people's parents might accidentally watch. And I'm sure not be happy about it. But
Well, like these guys that were doing the South Research Motion, like these are kind of the guys that shapes the world we live in now.
I believe they created the future, and what attracted me to it was that I felt my whole childhood, I was very much one of these guys. Like a lot of this is based on my childhood, and a lot of the things I did with my brother, believe it or not, who's here. My younger brother, who I did most of these things with, believe it or not, playing Command and Conquer Red Alert, playing Magic cards, staying up all night, just doing kind of nonsensical activities of fraternity, I believe have a cultural relevance that has not been acknowledged by pop culture. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Normally when you see nerds in movies, they're demeaned in a way that kind of makes them the butt of the joke. I'm thinking of things like the Big Bang Theory is obviously the obvious one, but things like Silicon Valley even, and I think Mike Judge is a genius, but even then, I think that oftentimes nerds are seen as very other, very not with it, in their own world, socially inept. And my perspective on people who are very obsessed with things that would be considered nerdy was that these people really invented the future. I was told when I was young that the early internet, like when the internet first started, was 99% Star Trek forums, right? So the birth of the internet was mostly Star Trek forums. And to me, like a light went off when I heard that, because it's like, oh, there's such a crossroads between technology and culture that engineer-type young people really get, and they wind up, that's why the opening credits of the movie is all, like the first video phone from Blade Runner, the video phone from 2001, like pop culture that we think of as just kind of like nerdy ephemera, but I believe sincerely winds up dictating what technologists will create that will become the future. And they don't get enough credit for that. There's still in many ways almost like the butt of a joke, and they're seen as people who just, program computers and are kind of in another world, but we live in their world, we just don't know it. Like the smartphone invented by these guys is our reality. Like, they would never think that because I think, especially these guys, they had no vision. It was one of the problems with their company. It's not like they were like, we want to create a world where this happens. But they wind up putting so much of their personality and their desires into their product that as soon as it takes off, out of their control, it becomes the future. And yeah, I just never seen a film acknowledge that. I wanted to see something that was really like what my childhood was like and really represented me and my friends making movies. And I'm always so disappointed that mass media never seems to get that right. Like it always seems so fake.
Yeah. I mean, the film's great, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, this is absolutely my bag, and this is going to go down well with an audience. So thank you all for coming and saying what the film in the Q&A. But like to talk maybe a little bit about the sort of cast. The cast is insane for this film, and your previous films have been you've a lot of the stuff you do is sort of guerrilla filmmaking sort of style things, and very improv and like spontaneous way you film things. How much sort of wiggle room did you afford the cast for this film?
Glenn and Jay, for the most part, were not so interested. I really like working with comedians, and it's the reason that I cast both those guys, but they weren't so interested in improvising within scenes, and I was surprised by that, because what I imagined was going to happen was in all my other work that we never write scripts. This is the first script I'd ever written, and we would normally just come up with everything on the day, all the dialogue, we would just make it up. And here, because the content was so technical, and because the story was kind of so manicured and very specific things had to happen, the cast didn't want to improvise anything at all. And luckily, they also didn't want to rehearse. Because what that meant was that in learning our lines on set, it still created that kind of chaotic dynamism that Nirvana the band or my other films kind of had. So by not rehearsing it, I think we kind of captured that same energy. But to answer your question broadly, it was extremely different. It was very, very different. And really, me being on camera, I was the only person who was like coming up with random stuff or just sort of saying what I wanted. And the other engineers at Research in Motion, those are all young Toronto filmmakers that I knew and were my friends. And so we improvised all that stuff together, but the rest of the cast was very, very strict by the book. And I'm grateful for that because it gave us freedom to do what I think the 90s engineering department needed to represent, which was a kind of freedom, vitality, youthfulness that was ossified by this new force. So I got lucky by the fact that those guys weren't improvising.
It was like you found that was a good combination then of mixing both styles. I mean, you're very like proud of Canada, where you come from, and that's one of the reasons why I think I relate to you so much is I'm very passionate Scot, and I love Scotland and Glasgow and love this festival, and you get proud of where you come from and things. And the film, I think, makes a real effort to kind of portray Canadians in a grounded way. Was that something that was really at the forefront of your mind when you made the film?
I don't think of it that way. When I watched any of my films, I made a movie where I played a CIA agent who infiltrated NASA in the 1960s. And this may seem unrelated, but this will answer this question. We shot the movie, we were like, oh, it's gonna be fine. Like, this is a totally normal concept for a movie. And then when we finished the movie and started screening it at festivals, everybody was like, oh, so why did you guys play it as a bunch of Canadians who snuck into NASA? We were like, we're not playing Canadians. And then we went, oh, I guess we seem so Canadian that we can't even see it. And that's gonna be a major marketing problem for this movie because it never acknowledged that we were Canadians, but we're talking like the way we always do, like we're always saying A, and it's the 1960s, like it was a disaster in terms of how we were behaving. And so in a movie like this, I don't think any of us were even thinking about being Canadian. We were just being ourselves. But casting Glenn as Jim, who is a Canadian, but he's a real wannabe American. Like he's a guy who I think was successful because he sees somebody like Gordon Gekko from Wall Street and doesn't think that that's a caricature or a criticism of American businessmen. He thinks that's how you do it. And so by casting an American in that role, I was trying to intentionally get away from the Canadianism of that guy because he in real life very much modeled his style after what he thought the Americans were doing. And he hated Americans, but he really had a kind of envy of it at the same time. So it's Canadian by dint only of the fact that me and all my friends are Canadian, and we're not trying to hide it.
I think what we'll do is open up to some audience questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. There is a microphone, I think. Have we got a roving mic? So please wait till we so we'll walk to the back here, this chap on the left hand side, and we'll walk our way down. Wait for the mic and then.
I will give you some credit for the shirts in the film, not to you for all the Mortal Kombat tunes, my childhood. But main question was the shooting style of the film kind of reminded me of Succession. Are you a fan?
Of the show Succession? I liked a lot of season one. I think it really fell off the cliff. I think those actors. And what happens with a lot of shows like that, in my opinion, first of all, I'm very critical of things, and like my taste is about that big. So I liked a lot of what Succession was doing in the first season, and then as soon as like the actors are like, oh, we're stars, then I felt like everybody needs to stop trying. But that shooting style, like you're sort of talking about like an observed, lots of zoom lenses, being far away, shooting through glass, that is we owe a lot more to like documentaries from the 90s. That was our big inspiration for how we were shooting. There's a Penny Baker movie called The War Room, which is a documentary about the Clinton campaign in the 90s that we stole a ton from. Like if you'd seen that, what you'd be saying is, boy, you really ripped off Penny Baker back, as opposed to saying that we ripped off McKay, which we did. I mean, that's a lot of the same environments. specifically when they're in New York and we're shooting in New York. Like we were stealing things verbatim, mostly from The Big Short though, not Succession. But a lot of that came from trying to figure out how all my other films have been fake documentaries. Like they try to be documentaries where the camera is acknowledged and we work with the camera. And here, I wanted to do that less because I thought it was going to be harder for somebody like Jim to participate in a documentary about his own company. Like I thought he'd be like, don't shoot me, like in character. And so there's subtle nods, like the characters will look at the camera every once in a while, like there's a few like subtle moments of that, but really, as soon as we started shooting with cameras where the lenses were this big, like this is a big upgrade from my other films, and the cameras are so huge and they need to move around on big wheeled machines, and it wound up creating restrictions on how we were shooting in such a way that, well, how do I tell this story in a way that will be interesting to you guys? It may be impossible. The point what I was trying to achieve, that I think Succession does so well, to bring it back to your point, is that show, when it's at its best, has a real observed quality. It feels as though you, the audience, are observing behavior that you shouldn't normally see. And what I really like to do is put actors in a situation where the camera's so far away that they can't even see it, and they have no idea if the camera's on them or on somebody in the background, and they just don't know. And the lenses and camera setup that we have are so big that it's so hard to hide them. Like if we were in this room, yeah, the camera would be so far away that we wouldn't be able to see it. I'll put it that way. Like we shoot on 500mm lenses, and so it's the same type of cameras that you shoot like National Geographic animal documentaries on, like when they're shooting dangerous animals. And so I was trying to achieve that same thing, but it led to a lot of problems in production, because as soon as you go into a room that's small or a place that isn't covered in glass, then it leads to some very awkward setups. Because one of the other tricks that I've always used is shooting with two cameras at the exact same time, so that you can cut any conversation to almost go any way you want. And when you have two of these gigantic cameras in a room, it makes it even more challenging. So one of the biggest restrictions, apart from working with the real cast, was that I had to sacrifice a lot of these two camera setups, which was really, really hard. I think a lot of the scenes in the film that were the most challenging, or the ones that we just had to cut entirely, were ones where we didn't have two cameras rolling at the same time. Because you may not think of it, but that is what allows you to make things move quickly, like to cut things so that it has rhythm. And because every single performance is different, every take is different, we could never cut takes with other takes. Are you guys following this? I'm realizing that if you guys aren't filmmakers, you're going to be like, what is he talking about? Anyway, yeah, I hate Succession.
Awesome, thank you so much for that question. Do we have one in the back here, in the middle here? There's someone here. Let's chat.
Thank you. Well, first of all, that was quite a decent movie.
Thank you. I'm assuming in Scotland that means it was good.
It means it's good.
No, I'm just kidding. Don't worry, you can't offend me.
My question is about your character, right? So in the movie, there's the movie night thing, and I just want to know what would be like the third one, because you get to see the picks Indiana Jones and then They Live.
They Live, yeah, John. Well, there's another movie that screens, we don't see it, but then they screen the Carpenter film, They Live, yeah. And then they're going to screen Ninja Turtles in 1989, but it gets cut off, unfortunately.
So that's yeah.
Was that a question? You're wondering if it was They Live?
No, I was just wondering. I forgot about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle ones. So I suppose the question's kind of answered then. It's just about like what the theme, what's like essential, like hat trick for movie night. What do your theme?
I'm going to tell you something. After Ninja Turtles, I have no idea what you said. But did I answer the question? Yeah, okay, okay.
Do we have a question? Was it chapter? Apologies, can we get it? We're close to it, everyone else can hear this. Let's get a mic for them.
I have two little questions.
You only allowed one. Choose the good one. That's
Okay. So, is there any updates on Nirvana the Band the Show season 2?
Yes. A question that I've been asked more or less constantly every week of my life for the last 5 years. I made a TV show in Toronto that was canceled because the network that was airing it, they were embezzling money from the government. And as soon as our national broadcaster realized that, Rogers, they cut off the funding, and so then my show was stopped midway through. And we had shot a third season of it, but we couldn't air it. And the reason I made this movie was because I needed something to do, because I wasn't making my TV show anymore. And so one of the hopes of me making this film was that I would be able to do something slightly more commercial that would then give me the opportunity to release the third season of the show. So I'm hoping this film does well enough that I can release the finished third season of the show. And I think we're probably gonna make a movie of it this summer too. We may, yes. You guys will like it. We might shoot some of it here actually. I've been to some interesting cities and I thought like, oh, we should do like a real globe-trotting Nirvana the Band movie. But don't worry, I haven't forgotten about it. It's gonna get released eventually. The great thing about the fans of the show is that they're so young that, you can wait. None of you are gonna die anytime soon. So it will be released in your lifetime, for sure. And I'm hoping sooner rather than later.
That's news. Do we have another question on this side? This chap here, with his arm raised there, we'll do this last question here. This one. Oh, there's so much time.
You've always been such a proponent of fair use copyright law, especially in Nirvana the Band show, obviously. But I noticed a bit in the film there you had, various movies playing, Steve Jobs, like keynote playing.
Yes.
Did you have to hone into that for this movie? And if you did, how did that go with organizations and whatever?
Well, I'll tell you, I had not. What he's talking about, if you don't understand, is that there's a legal loophole called fair use in North America, and it basically extends to worldwide. I'm sure you have something similar here in the UK. And what it allows artists to do is use copyrighted material in their own work, provided they're making some form of comment on the original copyrighted material. And I had no idea what this was when I made my first film about 10 years ago. But I was so young and naive that I put so many movies and so much music and so many like comic books and video games in that first movie. And I thought, oh, it should be fine. And then when we went to sell the film, I was told, oh, all this copyrighted material you can't release, it's illegal, because the copyright holders will come and sue you. And so I was put in a very interesting problem because I made this movie I was really proud of, that I knew people wanted to see, and I needed to find a legal framework to release it. And so I started working with lawyers in the United States who were developing this language of fair use, which created basically permission, a legal permission for you to release things that were impugning people's copyright legally. And because I learned that at such a young age, and because I was so fascinated with pop culture, I thought, oh, I should start making movies that directly use this law to show audiences things that they can't normally see in regular movies. And so when I went to start writing and shooting Blackberry, I was like, well, this is a great opportunity for me to take everything I've learned about fair use and make a whole movie where it's just wall-to-wall pop culture. And it's why, it's no accident that like we're watching a Steven Spielberg movie on VHS that we're then watching a John Carpenter movie that's like wall-to-wall movie posters and video games and things that when I was growing up and I would see movies, they would always have to fake, and I thought it was so lame, and it just seemed like the movie characters that I love lived in a parallel universe where they didn't eat the cereal that I ate, and they didn't watch movies that existed in my reality, and it just sucked so much. And so I thought, oh, if I make a movie about my own childhood like this, then I'm going to write it specifically to use fair use. And so the way that I did it was the lawyers that I was working with, a really, really smart guy named Chris Perez in Los Angeles, I just brought him in very, very early in the writing of the film, and I said, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need the characters to do in order to use all these references? And he just told me. So I was writing the movie with my lawyer, and most people wouldn't think to do that, but it allowed me to do all this crazy stuff that I guarantee you will never see in another movie. Like this is, it may not seem like it, but like this is like the bleeding, cutting edge of what is legally allowed to be released in a movie for real. And I doubt that even in the next decade or so, people will be even getting close to this amount of fair use, because we designed the film with that in mind. And again, it's the type of thing the normal audience would, I'm sure most of you are being like, big whoop, like who cares? But for filmmakers, it's like, oh my God, I didn't know you could do that. And you can, but you really need to be very careful about it, and you need to be doing it for a reason. And that rambling speech that I gave at the beginning about nerd culture being so related to technological achievement was, in fact, it's so silly, but like I needed to write an essay about this that was put into our legal log by our lawyer to create the legal defense for this film existing. And so me feeling that there was a connection between technology, engineers, and pop culture is a part of the legal defense for this movie being releasable in North America. Which one time I was watching a TV show, and an older guy was on the show, and he said, you know, I wish I had been told that all of the things I learned in high school would one day be very useful to me, because I would have paid so much more attention. And that's definitely how I felt when I was told I needed to write an essay defending the use of this media in my movie. And I sat down and I was like, aha, an essay. No problem. I'll just write it. And it was quite challenging.
Thank you so much for those questions. They were great. We're going to have to wrap up. But Matt is not going to be staying for the festival. You're here for a while. We'll do
and if you guys have more questions to ask, I've been to a lot of these. I'm sure if you guys want to take pictures or ask me anything, I've got nowhere to go. Like, my country is 1,000 miles away. So I'd be happy to hang around and talk to anybody about this and be very specific. But thank you so much for coming. This is a total honor. Again, I've never been to Scotland before, and it is my heritage is here. And my mom and brother are here. We're just by chance. And we've always wanted to come to Scotland, and yeah, it's a real treat to reconnect with our heritage, because it wasn't long ago. Mom, when did our relatives move to Canada? In the early 1900s, yeah, and the last name was Arnott and Luck. Are there any of those in here? No, eh? All right. Well, thank you again, and I really appreciate you guys coming. Have a great night.